Good evening, everybody. My name is Joe, and I am a weapon of mass instruction. Got a couple of things to talk about tonight. Primarily, I want to talk about setting up a campsite if you're surviving out in the wilderness away from civilization. But first, I want to go into a little bit about an interesting prophecy in Book of Revelations. And as some of you might already know, I'm not a Catholic, I'm not a Christian. Personally, some of the ideas in the Bible are good things to live by, but I don't personally follow that, except as it may relate to how things are going out in the world. And that might not make sense, except, well, of my own crazy theory, which is to say that, at the very least, Book of Revelation was added in by the order. But what I want to talk about is Revelation 12 and 13. And the reason why I want to talk about that real quick is I saw Nine Nania's video a couple days ago, and I'm not going to be able to link it because I'm making this video on the phone. But if you look up her page, you'll be able to see it quick and easy. She broke down the prophecy given in Revelation 12, which is the maiden clothed in the sun with a crown of 12 stars, travailing in labor and giving birth to a man who will rule with a rod of iron. And at that point, there's the beast, the great red dragon, who is waiting to devour the child. And she used an interpretation pertaining to astronomy when reading that prophecy, and that happened today. Basically, if you look at the constellation Virgo at 4:30 this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, October 16th, 2012, you have that particular alignment of stars and planets, Virgo. Oh yeah, and the other thing that is said is, and the moon was at her feet. The moon actually aligns with Virgo's feet, and Virgo, the constellation, lies directly behind the sun. The sun is basically sitting right where her stomach or her birth canal would be. And so that's a double meaning, clothed with the sun, but the sun is also the child, which is, if you read into the prophecy there, it's metaphor for Jesus. So he would be the son. And at the same time, Saturn lies between Virgo's legs, the beast waiting to devour the child. So that happened today, and I read that section, and then the next section of it, Revelations 13, and that talked about the beast with 7 heads and 10 crowns, and one of the heads had been gravely wounded, but everybody was amazed that it grew back, and how it was given power over all the people and to make war with the saints, and how it was blaspheming against the word of God. And when I read 7 heads, it made me think of G7. So I did a quick search on that, and it turns out the G7 is not a political entity per se; it's more an economic entity. So the G7 is the economic heads of 7 different nations: the U.S., the U.K., Italy, Germany, Japan, Canada, and France. Was that it? U.S., U.K., Italy, Japan, Germany, Canada, France. G7. And if you look at those 7 countries, Germany had been gravely wounded as a result of World War II, but it's healed itself since then. And a lot of people were talking about the G8 because of Russia being the same way, but I think it's the G7, because you read further in that section, and that's the part where it talks about and a mark was given to the people so that they cannot trade unless they have the mark of the beast, or know the name of the beast or the number thereof, and that whole section. So everybody's thinking about the mark of the beast being the RFID chips, and it has everything to do with trade and currency and economy. But it doesn't really talk too much about politics, except we all know that the politics of the nations are driven by the economies of the nations, or the, illusion of an economy that they all have. So that's what I took out of that. I think that's what's happening next. We're gonna see the G7 take charge and, probably force the UN to adopt the RFID economy thing. That's got a good possibility of happening, and we're already seeing stuff about it all through this entire year. And the years previous, we now have schools where the kids are being forced to wear RFID tags, not implanted, but it's basically indoctrinating them into the system even more. All right, so that's that. I want to talk about camping. Camping in terms of survival. This isn't just your everyday, hey, let's take a camping trip this weekend and go out and see the great outdoors. This is society broke down, and maybe you have to travel, or you were driven out of your home for one reason or another, whether it be a disaster or act of terrorism, or freaking, more likely than not, just totalitarian government, fucking police state all up in your grill. Whatever the case, if you're out in the wilderness, eventually you're going to have to slow down, stop, and rest for a night or two. And so there's a couple things to keep in mind when you're setting up your camp. Oh, and by the way, I did spend a couple of hours today cleaning my guns. That's very important. I let some of them go, and I found a couple of little bits of rust, and that's just horrendous. I feel so ashamed that I let that happen. I was able to clean them up, but even if you don't use your guns, check them periodically, at least every month. Give them a good cleaning, give them a good rub down, CLP, all that good stuff. Make sure there's no rust, and make sure the action operates the way it's supposed to. Like my carry, my Beretta, even though that was the cleanest of the bunch, but it was dry. It was actually bone dry by the time I picked it up and cleaned it today, because it's always out with me. It's never in storage. Okay, so you're camping, you're out in the woods, or you just got done hiking and you got to stop for the night. Couple things to think about for your campsite. All right, one, ideally you want to be near a source of water. All right, in that previous episode, recall that I had mentioned you want to be able to find sources of water and use the water you find before the water you already have, so that if you have to pick up your stuff and go, you already have your stockpile of water and food ready to be eaten in a pinch. You want to be near a source of running water if possible. So a stream, a brook, a river, all those. A spring would be perfect, because that if you're by a spring, it's going to be about as pure as you can find. It's not going to have all the contamination that you would find downriver past all the towns and cities and stuff. Again, you want to be able to find that cleanest source of water possible. And if you're on a forced march or a hike or whatever you got to do if you're traveling, don't be afraid to stop a little bit early. All right, you wouldn't want to stop at 4 o'clock in the afternoon if you still have 5 hours of daylight left, if that was the summertime. But if the sun is still a little bit over the horizon, don't be afraid to stop if you've got a good source of water close by. Your campsite should be roughly 150 feet away from that source of water. You don't want to be too close, because let's say it rains on your campsite, that runoff would go right into the river. You want to be a little bit far away so that runoff doesn't go right into where you're drinking from. You don't want to contaminate that water just by being there. All right, so actually, you know what? I didn't really think of it, but I'm going to break out my my handy dandy whiteboard for this one real quick. This won't take long, but I'll draw what I'm talking about. And so bear with me. So you want to be about 150 feet away from your water source. Okay? And for the sake of simplicity, we're going to say that the water runs north to south. All right? Okay. So here we've got our river in the blue, and we got north, south, east, and west. So our campsite, let's use a green tent. All right, so again, our campsite is 150 feet to the river. And here we have that. Okay, our green pup tent. And that's pretty much your good guideline. If you want to set it up a little bit further away, that's fine, but you don't want to go too far for your drinkable water, okay? Now, you're going to have to set up priorities as far as where you're going to go for what type of water, okay? Your purest water, your drinking water, is going to be, all right, about 150 feet upstream from your campsite, okay? So that's your drinking. Here's a water bottle or a canteen. There we go. All right, so that's your drinking water. Your dishwater is going to be, there we go, about 50 feet upstream. All right, and what I mean by dishwater is when you're eating, you're going to have probably some dishes, either a pot or a pan to cook with, or your plate, or spoons, forks, knives, stuff like that. If that's your style of camping, you're going to want to wash that out so it doesn't get all crudted up and rotting and stuff. All right, so that's going to be 50 feet upstream, and that's going to be your utensils and all that stuff. So there we go, fork and a plate. All right, that's where that is. Directly across from the campsite, you're not really going to have anything. All right, and then you're gonna go 50 feet downstream, or you could even go 100 feet downstream. All right, I'm going to mark it 50 for your bathing, okay? So that's how that's going to go. There we go, that's that bar soap. So you're going to go 50 feet or more downstream for your bathing, okay? Obviously, you're going to want to wash up from time to time, especially if for whatever reason you got into a fight or a scuffle. Maybe you got blood on you. Maybe you had to climb in the mud or something like that to get where you are now. You're going to get dirty out in the wilderness, one way or the other. So periodically, you're going to want to wash up and shave and all that stuff. And you're going to do your bathing down here, farther downstream from your campsite. Okay. So this is basically all common sense stuff, but this is stuff that they taught me a little bit in Boy Scouts, but mainly in the Marine Corps that I learned this. You want upstream to be your potable drinking water, and of course, even after you take that water from the stream, you're going to want to filter it and then boil it and then purify it. All right, with was it chlorine, bleach, or iodine? All right, whatever purification system you've got. Ideally, you want to be able to do all three. Sometimes you might not be able to light a fire at your campsite. All right, that's going to be up to you as situation dictates. All right, if you're on the run from maybe freaking a rogue faction of the government is locking down everything and trying to take away your guns, and so you don't want to light a campfire because of tactical reasons, you don't want to give away your position, then obviously you'll be eating cold rations. You're not going to have to worry so much about washing up your utensils, but also you won't be able to boil your water before you purify it. All right, so you also want to be careful of that. There are ways to test water for cleanliness and different kinds of contaminants, but of course, the better they are, the more you're going to be paying for them. But there are different systems you can use to test the water. But you know what? At the very least, filter and purify. If possible, boil it first. All right, for a good 15 minutes, you want to boil it. Is that right? 15 minutes? I think it's 15 minutes. Anyway, of course, you can look that up later somewhere else if you need more info on that. All right, so you got your pure water upstream. You're cleaning your dishwater. All right, a little bit further downstream, and then a little bit further downstream, you're going to have your bathing water. All right, and that's all set up so that, and that's also this. You're going to want to change the distance depending on how fast the river is running, okay? If you've got a really slow-moving river, then you're probably going to want to widen the distance a bit more, all right, to make this maybe like 200 or even 300 feet upstream. It's going to be more of a trek, but you're less likely to pick up contamination from cleaning your dishes or cleaning your body from downstream back up, because it is possible for that stuff to travel upstream if it's not moving too fast. A quick-moving brook, on the other hand, you know, you're pretty much good to go with these guidelines here. Now, another thing that people don't really want to think about, but you probably should when it comes to setting up a bivouac site or a campsite, is where are you going to shit? To put it bluntly, where are you going to shit? Where are you going to piss? Okay, that's probably going to be number one on people's priority list. When they stop moving for the day, their system settles down, and of course you're going to need to take a leak or whatever the case may be. Don't let anybody just piss wherever they want to go, okay? Where you want to put that is going to be, there we go, boom. At least 50 feet, if not more, diagonally downriver in the opposite direction, okay? So the river's all the way over here to the west. You're going to put your what they call the cat hole down here to the east, all right, the southeast of your campsite. And basically a cat hole, all it is, it's a, I believe, 2 foot deep or more trench in the ground, all right. It's going to be, there we go, 2 feet deep, a foot wide, and 4 feet long, okay. And we use that for a platoon worth of men, you know, men, women, children, whatever. But that's going to be a big enough size to deal with anything up to a platoon level, you know, up to 50 people. You don't want to really make it too much smaller than that, unless you're just camping for one night and then you're going to move on in the morning. But if you plan on staying there for a couple of days, definitely make it that 2 foot by 2 foot deep by 1 foot wide by 4 feet long. And that's basically where you're going to take a leak, where you're going to shit, all that good stuff. And it's going to be at least 50 feet away. Oops, yep. I almost wrote that 50 backwards. All right. Downriver and away from the camp. So it's going to be basically southeast as opposed to southwest of the bathing area. All right. And all that together, it's going to keep all that nasty stuff away from where you're camping. More importantly, it's going to keep all that nasty stuff away from your clean source of water. Okay, the last thing you want to do, and also you don't want it to be uphill from the river, okay? So if this section right here happens to be uphill from the river, then you're probably going to want to find a different spot, okay? Ideally, you want it to be a little bit downhill from where the river is so that it doesn't actually get back that way. Because even though you might not care about it, another group might come along later, and if they happen to camp further down south, you really don't want them to have to deal with your shit water. You know, but then again, that's up to you. So that's that. And now lastly, when it comes to setting up your camp for a night or two, or even a week, or whatever the case may be, you recall last episode I mentioned you want to be able to hunt or forage and gather food on the move. so that you don't have to dip into your emergency rations, MREs, dehydrated astronaut shit, whatever the case may be. That's your emergency stuff, okay? So that might be good if you're on the move and you don't have a chance to hunt, or if you don't know how to hunt and you gotta find a place to forage, but you haven't found that place yet, right? If you've got that new supply of meat, berries, nuts, stuff like that, keep in mind that animals' senses are very keen, especially bear, wildcats, stuff like that, depending on your area. So you're going to have to keep an eye out for different predators that might be in the area. You don't want to just trust that there are no predators in that area, because they will smell it, and even if it's not the best food out there, for them, it's there. And if they're not as dumb as people give them credit for. They're actually smarter. So if they know people are there, they might just go for it, knowing, that, okay, in the past, I've smelled people and I smelled food, and it was just right out there waiting for me. All right, so there's something I learned in the Boy Scouts. It's called a bear bag. All right, and basically what it is you don't want this right in the middle of the camp. This is going to be at least 25 feet away, if not more. All right, let's say you got a tree. All right, and if you don't have any trees in your area, you're kind of SOL. Sorry about that, but you're going to want a tree with branches sticking out of it. And basically, you're going to hang this bear bag several feet away from the trunk of the tree. All right. All it is, it's a rope tethered to that branch if you can reach it, or anchored to something on the ground like a rock. And then hanging from that is going to be a bag, and in that bag you're going to fill it with whatever food you've got. All right. So there you go. That's pretty much what a bear bag is going to look like. You don't want that too close to your campsite. But you're going to have it at least a dozen feet up, at least 12 to 15 feet up from the ground, and at least 4 or 5 feet away from the tree, the trunk of the tree itself. Try to make it as inaccessible to bears and other predators as possible, or scavengers even. Now, it's not going to be foolproof. Obviously, squirrels can still get at it. But luckily, squirrels mainly go for nuts and berries. So if you're mainly stocking meat, you generally have to worry about the wildcats, who may or may not be able to climb the tree, and the bears, who could, but they probably won't bother unless they're starving. All right, so that's your basic camp setup. All right, and it's all common sense. And a lot of it, what it comes down to is it's as situation dictates. Just like I mentioned with that campfire, if you're trying to avoid an enemy force, or bandits, or marauders, or something like that, or trying to stay hidden, you shouldn't light a campfire. But you may want to if it's cold out, or you're just, this is your average run-of-the-mill disaster, and you know that there's nobody really looking for you. So hopefully that helps for anybody who might have to be out on the move in the woods or wild areas coming up in the future. Yeah, I'm going to add it on. So that's my main thing. One last thing I want to talk about is fire watch, all right, or guard duty, basically. And we had this to some extent in the Boy Scouts, but mainly we did this in the Marine Corps when we were basically practicing for situations where you're going to want to be tactically sound and ready to fight at a moment's notice. Basically, you want to set somebody up to watch a couple of things, mainly looking for danger from either wild animals near the campsite, or, possibly some sort of troop movements that may be hostile in the area, bandits, whatever the case may be, because not everybody is going to travel by day and sleep at night. A lot of people out there are going to operate by night, and a lot of people out there might not be so nice. If this is a shit hits the fan, society breaks down and you're on your own trying to survive. So depending on how many people you've got in your party, that's going to determine what kind of guard setup you're gonna have. And it's situation dependent. All right, so I'll use a squad sized element. That's 12 to 15 people. All right, 12 to 15 people. You set up your bivouac site. Everybody's got their tents out. Maybe you had a campfire during the daytime to cook up your meal, or maybe you had cold rations, whatever the case may be. When it's time for people to go to sleep, basically you're going to set up 2 people if possible, or more depending on the size of your party, okay? So for us, for a squad-sized element, we would use 2 people at a time, and basically the whole squad would get a chance during the course of the night. So, 12 to 15 people, you could set it up if you were going to be camping for a good 8 hours during darkness hours, or even during daylight hours. If people were going to be asleep or whatever, it would be 2 people, and, situation dictates, but we would either do 1-hour shifts or 2-hour shifts, depending on how many people we actually had to work with. So, if you're going to be there for 8 hours, you'd probably want to do 4 2-hour shifts, 2 people each, and that'll be 8 people being used up for watch. And of course, you would want to rotate the duty so that those same 8 people don't get the watch over and over and over again. At least in some cases, people will be able to get a night full of rest as opposed to broken up with that 2-hour watch. Okay, I'm pretty much going to leave it at that. And the main thing with the fire watch or the guard duty is that person or those people need to stay alert and awake. So do whatever you got to do to stay awake. I've had situations where I would have to stay on my feet even though I was dead ass tired from hiking the day before. I would have to stay on my feet in order to make sure I was still awake. Situation dictates. If you're in a situation where you don't want to give away your position, you can't smoke if you're a smoker. I knew a couple of tricks that would kind of hide the cherry. But believe it or not, the cherry from a cigarette can be seen from over a mile away, depending on the terrain. So you don't even want to trust it if you're in thick woods. You don't even want to trust that, because if they got thermal imaging or night vision, whoever might be tracking you or looking for you or looking for anybody in general, then they'll still be able to see that cherry from that cigarette, and it's going to look kind of odd in the nighttime. Trust me on this. So chewing tobacco, that's a nasty habit, just like smoking is, but if you're a dipper, that helps to keep you awake. But you don't want to dip on the ground in the campsite, okay? You might have to use a spitter, or if you're on the outskirts of the campsite, that might be fine. Depends on what your group says about it. Coffee grounds, coffee grounds will help. I actually would pretty much brew up the equivalent of instant coffee for a guard watch sometimes. Water will do the trick, especially in cold weather. Cold water helps to keep you awake and alert. Worst case scenario, the worst thing I did to keep myself awake, and I only ever did this one time, was I would basically put a drop of tobacco, or not tobacco, a drop of Tabasco sauce in my eye, in the corner of my eye, like an eye drop. And it burned like hell, and it sucked balls, but you know what? I stayed awake for those 2 hours. Sure as shit. It sucked. It really did. But you know what? Do whatever you got to do to stay awake, because the worst thing that could happen is to get complacent, get sleepy, and fall asleep on watch. Trust me on this. If you fall asleep on watch, that's Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That will be the time that somebody happens upon your party. Maybe you get attacked by a wild animal of some kind, and you don't want that to happen to you. So there you go. That's your main basics when it comes to setting up a campsite, bivouac site for a day or two or more. And always remember, don't leave anything behind, if at all possible. All right. So when you're getting ready to go up on the move, cover up that cat hole. All right, that shit hole, that piss hole. Cover it all up, fill it all in. And if you're in a tactical situation, possible combat environment, cover it with dead foliage. All right, leaves, branches, whatever. Don't cover it too much. All right, sometimes too much camouflage is worse than none at all. But you want to have enough to where somebody who might be tracking you is going to have a harder time tracking you by your leavings. All right. Same thing if you dug a fire pit, fill it back in over the ashes of the fire. Okay. Fill it back in, cover it with dead leaves or grass or whatever. But try to hide yourself. Police call the area. Make sure you don't litter. for a number of reasons. Obviously, you know, you wouldn't want to litter out there anyway, but also if somebody's trying to track you, they will look for stuff like garbage, all right? Because human beings, by nature, we tend to leave garbage behind, even if we're not thinking about it and even if we're trying to live pretty much economically sound. Pick up your trash, take it with you, keep it in your bug out bag or whatever. Maybe nominate somebody and rotate the duty to carry a trash bag with you until you get to a more built up area where you can get rid of it. Or worst case scenario, you can bury it in that cat hole. All right, that's not an ideal solution, but if you've got a lot of trash you got to get rid of quick and you can't carry it with you, then bury it there where it's not going to do so much harm as being left out in the open where it could, you know, interfere with the ecosystem in the area or lead to somebody tracking you down if you didn't want them to. All right, I think I jacked my jaw long enough. I'm going to leave you at that, and hopefully I have some good ideas coming up soon on things that people might want to think of for survival and stuff like that. You all stay safe now. Keep your head on a swivel. Peace.